all filter in. And Dr. Barnes had a conflict. He's going to be here about 15 minutes late. So welcome, everyone. Here comes Mr. Sutton. So yeah, we definitely have a quorum, so we will move forward. Jenny Wren, will you call the roll, please?
Pat Bradford.
Here.
Josie Barnhart.
Here.
Pete Wildeboer.
Present.
Kim Clark.
Here.
Jana Lennon. Hannah Moon.
Here.
Philip Sutton. Here. Charlene Thompson.
Here.
Jared Worthington.
Here.
Stephanie Walker. Rob Zappel, sorry. Eric Cradle. Amanda Kuziak.
Here.
Lisa Wurtzbacher. Natalie English. John Hennett.
Here.
Christopher Riley.
And Eric's here. We're gonna move through the next few minutes slowly and let folks come in. So we have Ms. Barnhart for the Pledge of Allegiance and John Hennett for the invocation. Let's start with the invocation.
Heavenly Father, I give thanks for the opportunities, my experience at Parent and my business, my vocation for the extension of my community service, improving our schools. I ask for blessings of discernment and encouragement over this crew as they endeavor on the most difficult, most encouraging project, and that's to improve our schools for our community. We ask that you bless this meeting and bless those that participate. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Josie and John. Let's approve the agenda and the minutes next. Has everybody had a chance to see the agenda and see the minutes? And I would need a motion for both.
So moved. Second.
Okay, do we want to do both together or do we want to take them separate? Let's start with the minutes. No, excuse me, the agenda. Let's start with the agenda. So we have a first and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. It passes. Not sure how many of us are here right now. It's a running total. Okay, for the minutes, do I have a motion to accept the minutes? Mr. Wildeboer?
Yeah, make motion that we accept the minutes as written.
And a second? Okay, so we have a motion and a second to accept the minutes. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Okay, the minutes are approved. Now, this committee is it has morphed. While we slept, our committee has morphed. You'll see two new faces at the table because we are no longer the Finance Committee Advisory. We are Finance, Capital, and Bond. And the chair placed Mr. Wildeboer and Ms. Barnhart on the committee representing Capital and representing Bond. So we're going to continue on in that mode with a slight change. And our next up is the presentation on EC. And this is Julie Varnum is present with us today, and she is our Assistant Superintendent of Student Support, and with her is Johanna Souza, who is also our EC Director. And they're going to do this part.
Okay. So what you have in your handouts, and it's also on the screen, you have an overview of some of the information that we compiled for the Legislative Committee for discussion with General Assembly and lawmakers around our funding formulas and the funding needs. And what Joanna and I thought was really important to capture was the significant number of students with exceptional needs. So we we talk about EC students, we talk about special education, those are one and the same. So our exceptional children require special education services. So when we talk about special ed, when we talk about EC, all the same. We have a significant number of students that require a much higher level of service than the broader population. And those students that require those more intensive and sustained services have much higher cost services associated with them. And so Joanna can jump in at any point. I'm just going to give a bit of an overview of this information, and then we can answer any questions or carry out any further discussion that would be helpful. So overall, we have 108 maximum service classrooms. So that means that these are students that require special education services more in a self-contained approach. They are not just resource services or related services. They are primarily educated by a special education teacher the absolute majority of the day. And in those classrooms, we have a smaller staff to student ratio. Again, these are students that are not coming in for services, meaning pulled out of their general classroom and coming in generally. They are mainly educated in those classrooms the majority of the day. So in these classrooms, many of these students also require additional services, such as adaptive equipment, assistive technology devices. Those could be for communication. Those could be for all kinds of different needs that they may have. And then most often, students in these classrooms require one or more related services. So it's not just the cost of a student in a smaller classroom with a special ed teacher and 1 to 2 to 3 teacher assistants. It's also the sheer number of students that also require physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech language therapy, visual supports. I mean, you name it, we've got multiples, audiology, hearing impairment. Yes, orientation and mobility. So you have a high concentration of very specialized instruction and services that go into that. So just to give a snapshot of really high cost services for individual students, wanted to give a bit of a range of what some of our more intensive services are costing. So this school year, we have 15 students across the district that require one-on-one nursing services. This is not the service of the school nurse. This is a registered nurse that is assigned only to one child. And that nurse cannot serve another student. They can only serve one-to-one. And it's because of the nature of the medical fragility of that particular child. So again, this year we have 15 of those. So in addition to our school nurses in our buildings, we have 15 RNs that serve 15 children. And again, that cost ranges depending upon the number of hours the student is in school. The vast majority of our students are in school full days, 5 days a week. We do have a few students that have modified days, so they are not able to be with us the majority of the school days, so they're there for partial days. So our price range is different, but $60,000 to $80,000 per student. And again, right off the bat, just one-to-one nursing is $900,000 a year.
And the prices of the contracts range too, the $10.
And we are careful to contract these services and not hire for these services because we are not trained or skilled in supervising registered nurses. We need to make sure that we're utilizing an agency that has that medical training that can provide that those required licensure support, supervision, and that can read the medical orders. We do utilize our county Health and Human Services school nurse supervisors to help us determine the need for an RN for a student, but they do that as a support to us from an administrative perspective to make sure that we are not just providing an RN for every student that the parent says needs an RN. We make sure that we have a medical review of that, and we use our Health and Human Services partners for that medical review. And so the contracts, we have different contracts based on the different services that students may have already had before they come to us. Because if you have a student that has around-the-clock nursing care in their home, we need to be consistent with that particular agency that already supports them. CNAs, so nursing assistants. We have 4 students that require those, and that means that they have some type of medical need that is not to the degree of requiring a registered nurse, but still needs someone with some level of medical training to be able to provide for their personal care. That cost for those per student, $37,000, and a total of close to $150,000. And again, this changes year to year. I will say that the number of students requiring any level of nursing services has increased year over year. I can recall when I was the special ed director, let's see, I'm going to go 6 or 7 years ago, and Kim, you may even remember some of these numbers. I think we were looking at maybe 8 or 9 students. So we've close to doubled inside of probably 6 years. Okay, and jump in at any point. Language facilitators. So I'm going to add these in kind of together. Language facilitators, educational interpreters. Some of those are for employees, some are for contract, and then cued speech transliterator. All of these are for students with some level of hearing impairment or hearing loss. And students that have a level of hearing loss or hearing impairment require significant additional services in order to access their educational environment. And so this is kind of the continuum of needs. Cued speech, educational interpreter, contract, educational interpreters, and language facilitators all support on the different levels of hearing loss and need. And again, those costs are listed there. You can see pretty significant. And as you may understand, what's different about an educational interpreter or a language facilitator, they're really only able to serve one child at a time because they need to make sure that they are providing that language interpretation to that child and that child is receiving it, but they are having to interpret and provide the ears and the sound for that child for everything that's happening in that space. So you don't have groups of children with one interpreter. They are one-to-one service. Behavior technicians, would this be for, is that where you had the LPI in there?
Yeah, this was kind of captured, several weeks ago. If we were having behavior technicians through the duration of the year, the cost is much higher. This was just kind of from now until the end of the school year.
Yeah. So we do use a contract service, Learning Perspectives, and that service is allowing us to, in the moment, provide an additional person in the classroom when there is a significant need around a student's particular behavior. And generally those are going to be more on the aggressive behavior side, so that we can have one person in there that can really support and maintain that regulation and that emotional and behavioral regulation in the classroom for that student to still participate with other peers. Most often we use our teacher assistants as this level of support, but sometimes we have to provide additional person in the classrooms. And having a contracted person allows us to also have some flexibility and split time if they're serving students for parts of the school day.
Madam Chair, may I ask a question?
Yes.
For clarity, with the LPI, they're district-wide, so it goes wherever the highest need is, so they're not at a specific location. Whenever we contract with them, it's wherever, if Ms. Clark is seeing a higher need at her school, then she'll receive it for whatever amount of time is needed to help with that. Okay. And then at one point, I thought I remember, do they do trainings for our staff to potentially get that, or was that something we were exploring and didn't?
Yeah, LPI wouldn't be doing that.
Okay.
We have used other entities in the past, whether it be a board certified behavior analyst, and we would do additional training, but we don't use LPI for training.
Okay.
So to get it right, LPI is the name of a contract vendor that we use
Yes.
when needed. Okay.
For behavior technicians only.
And just for fun, explain what a behavior technician does. You sort of did, but you haven't.
Yes. So A behavior technician would be an additional person that supports in a classroom that most often works with one child. So if, for example, we have a student who can experiences challenging behaviors that may escalate very quickly, this is an additional person to help provide additional structure and supervision for that child so that they're not in a group necessarily with maybe 8 students and 1 teacher and 1 or 2 teacher assistants. You have one more person that can be maintaining that 100% supervision of that one child, maintaining close proximity to them, and then if they're identifying maybe a heightened level of anxiety or heightened level of behavior, challenging behavior, they can provide immediate support and not have to try to carry out instruction that they were already planning. If we have a student that may be more prone to running out of a classroom, then you have an additional person that can at least maintain that proximity and have their sole focus be on helping de-escalate a situation with a particular child.
Wow, thank you.
Would you guys add anything else in? And I'm including Kim in this. So Kim Clark, I know she's an amazing middle school principal, but prior to that, she was in the special ed program with us and working at the district level, supporting as a liaison too. So she's seen it all. Behavior, yeah, all of it. Anything to
Yeah,
add?
I would just say that they very much are a support to the teacher and the child to maintain the behavior intervention plans, to maintain all the accommodations that are required. They are a game changer when it comes to that level of intense need.
And often.
Because then it maintains the safety of not only that child, but the other children too. So it's.
And often they're able to model some of that instruction, with the behavior intervention plans, the intervention itself, to the other paras in the class, teacher assistants in the classroom.
And the goal is to always try to help that child learn the appropriate replacement behaviors so that they don't require this level of support anymore. So there's always this goal of trying to work this behavior technician out. So it's really a true team approach when the behavior technicians are in the classrooms.
Thank you, Kim. Mr. Wildebohr?
I was just wondering, the old terminology, and maybe the terminology's changed with BCBA, is that still in there anywhere, or where does that fit in that whole piece?
So that's going to actually be in the next one.
Okay, I'm ahead of myself,
Yeah.
sorry.
And hold on, Julie, let me just make a public service announcement. I had been asked to remind you that green on the microphone means you're talking, red means they can't hear you on the live stream. So just a reminder when you speak that you do need to speak into the microphone and be it on green. Thank you.
And this one's green. I hope they can hear it.
It's green.
Yeah, we're green. I hope they can hear it. We'll move it closer. So to answer on, and by the way, we love acronyms and we don't realize we use them. So
We know.
if an acronym has been utilized and I haven't translated it, make sure you ask about that.
Members
So-
of the committee have supplied us with an acronym list. I know.
It's amazing. And we have to continue to add to it, I'm sure. So out-of-district placements, such as the Center for Pediatric Behavior Health, this is where BCBA, Board Certified Behavior Analysts, provide us a level of support. Now, we do use a contracted Board Certified Behavior Analyst to come in sometimes to observe, to give some counsel and some guidance on a behavior intervention plan, or give us some indications of an appropriate placement, or to kind of test our theories on an appropriate placement for a student, or to provide professional development. But this one is the more concentrated. The Center for Pediatric Behavior Health, we have a contract with them for serving 3 to 4 students at a time throughout a school year. That cost is very significant because it is at a clinic site here in town, and they are able to provide their BCBA, Board Certified Behavior Analyst, and then they have registered behavior technicians, and of course we call those RBTs. So they have their team of BCBAs and RBTs that are really conducting a very in-depth functional behavior assessment while they're providing a service, an educational service and a clinical service for students who are exhibiting the most challenging behaviors most often of an aggressive nature, but sometimes it might be complicated by some medical, sensory, communication needs. So that contract can cost us in an annual budget $250,000 to $300,000 a year. And again, you can see that when we talk about serving 3,500 children with IEPs or that have special education services, when we talk about these costs, these dollars come right off the top, and then we have to figure out how to spread the rest of the dollars across the vast majority of our students with special needs, because the vast majority of our students with special needs are served inside general education classrooms with pull-out services by resource teachers or other special ed teachers, and then related services like speech. So that kind of goes through the majority of the high-cost piece. Do you want me to do a quick little discussion on how federal dollars are allocated?
Federal or local and state?
Well, I was just going to mention, so the local and state is what I've provided on the maintenance of effort to give an idea of that. The federal dollars, so all of our services are governed under federal law, IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And when Congress enacted IDEA, Congress determined that 40% of the funds that are required to serve students under IDEA will be provided by the federal government. The federal government has consistently provided around 15% of the funds required, not 40. However, the requirements under IDEA have never relaxed. So it's never been fully funded, but the requirements have always been fully intact. And these services are the most litigated services in any school district. So extremely important not only to provide the services that a child requires to access their education, it's also really important to meet the letter of the law, whether it's funded by the same law that requires it or not. Okay, I don't know what else you might want shared or if you have any questions.
So I just wanted, second page just gives you the numbers, and I kind of did this for Commissioner Zappel to see the local funds there, the local funds per student and how it's progressed over the years. And Julie gave me this in a chart, and sometimes I can't do charts and tables, so I condensed it down, but this is her information, but I just put it in a form that I can easily read it. And I just wanted you to know, when we ask for local dollars, it's because of what Julie just shared. The federal government mandates, that we have the services, but they only pay for 15% of it, so it's got to come from somewhere, and you're the only person left standing when the music stops. And we know that happens a lot, but we just want to explain to you why it's happening and where the dollars are happening, just for all of the county people to understand. It's not that we're being greedy. We have to serve every child that shows up at the door, regardless of disabilities. Yes, Ms. Barnhart.
And thank you, Ms. Bradford. And I just want to add, too, the board had adopted a resolution of support to increase the IDEA funding to that 40%, so we're in support of that. There's also been a pilot on the state talking about EC funding formula model. It's another advocacy piece that we're actively seeking to secure more funding from different areas. So I know you're the last man standing, but please know there are different resources and avenues that we are exploring and continuing to advocate for, because we understand this is a complex situation, and ultimately we want the best for our students.
Yes, Amanda.
I have a question about the local funds total. When we fund on an ADM rate, how can it be lower than what we're actually funding per child? Say that again? So in 2021, local funding total, and the local funds per student, we funded EC children at $1,008 is what this is saying.
That's on top of. So the important thing to remember when you talk about EC is EC kids get the same per pupil as all the other kids.
Yep.
And then they get in addition to. So this would be in addition to the per pupil all the other kids get.
Then I think that really needs to be made clear here, because it looks like we're saying
Okay.
locally, we only funded $1,000 per EC child when we fund at a much higher rate
Right.
by the ADM.
I will add that note to this.
So the calculation comes from the maintenance of effort report that we have to submit to the state that's asking about the on top of funding. So the translation, I think, is an important note. I also want to circle back real quick to add, in addition to the intensive and costly services, we also see a declining applicant pool, specifically around special education. These are hard to fill certified areas, and whenever we cannot find the number of applicants we need, we have to contract for those services. Contract services are significantly more expensive. And we don't have an opportunity to say, well, we'll put a sub in the classroom. We can't necessarily do that with some of these other areas. There is no substitute for physical therapy services. And also, physical therapists require, any new physical therapist that we hire requires a doctorate. So we have staff that are medically trained and educationally trained that have to have multiple licenses to be able to provide the services. The other contract services, you may mention any others?
The speech pathology is obviously an area that we're having to find and fill with contract services, and we're seeing, I've got a rate of $85 an hour, down to 65. I mean, it really ranges there, and we're starting to see those contracts really increase over the last couple of years. VI, teachers that are visually impaired, we're not able to find those teachers too, so we're having to contract out. So again, as Julie said, it's just kind of making us have to contract out for these positions as needed.
Mr. Wildebohr?
Two quick things, just want to note, because I think we just mentioned that we get approximately 15% on average. Right now, we're getting 30.
Right now, we are getting 13, so it's been an average of 15. It has, at its best, been about 18%, and I think that might have been about 6 years ago, or maybe 2018. Currently, we're about 13%.
And the other point is, Ms. Farnham and I are aware of a situation, not in this county, but of a person that required over $100,000 just for that one person. So, like I say, these are, significant, but there actually are some cases that are even more significant. Yeah. So, and you can't say, well, you can afford it. The money has to come from somewhere.
We have quite a few students that cost us more than $100,000.
Okay, there you go. Thank you.
Forward, because it fits right here. We didn't plan this to be this way, but two of our committee members, Natalie English, who is not present because she has a board meeting, and Mr. Hennick had proposed, and we are underway planning what I'm calling a junket because that fits my mental image of what we're going to do. We're going to Raleigh. And some of these things is what we're going to talk about. But we've titled it Modernize the Funding Formula. And it's a long list. It's not going to, we're not going to walk in and say, here we are, we brought some students, we brought Kim, we brought Hannah, we brought Jared, we brought cheerleaders, we brought a quartet to play on the grass between the two of these two legislative buildings.
Yeah, get kicked out first.
Yeah, trying to influence them. But this is all leading up to that. We are actively trying to get more money out of the state and the federal government. We really are. And we won't even know that. That's planned for the 8th. The idea was we'd be at lunchtime with our signage saying, luncheon concert courtesy of New Hanover County, modernize the funding formula. New Hanover County schools.
Modernize the allotment.
Right. Modernize the allotment formula.
And I think that Jim has a passionate story about assistant principals and student safety, and Hannah's got a good story about coming out of pocket for your classroom expenses, and I think we could personalize it, but not ask for a specific dollar amount, but say, we can give you examples of how the current allotment funding is not working for us. And if you could pilot our county or fix one in this biennium and correct it in the future biennium, I think it's more of a soft ask. And I know we've got some proposals up there now kicking around. I know that the allotment is being looked at I think they're moving away from the one-size-fits-all model, is the way I understand the studies going on now. And so I'm working with somebody up there who's going to help us get in front of all the advisors to Senator Berger, Speaker Hall, and make sure that we get to the people that do an education policy for our legislative leaders. And we'll meet with our delegation as well.
So you're all welcome to come, depending on.
Yeah, I'd love to know the timing of that, yeah.
So now with that, Amanda, you're going to lead us in an interactive budget simulation?
All right.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Joanna.
So I'm actually going to start on this page. This is something we are calling taxpayer receipts. What this technology does is it takes our current adopted property tax rate, so that is the 45 cents, and this is also based off of the adopted budget, so the 24-25 adopted budget. But what this technology does is it asks a resident, are you a homeowner? The resident or the individual on the software will say yes. If you do not know your property value, we do have links that lead to the property assessment search so that you can look up your property value. It will be a little different. Our property assessment search is now showing the 2025, meaning our new reeval properties. And this will be updated as we get closer to a recommended and adopted budget. This will get updated again, but this was a very soft launch when we first launched this to just see what's adopted now and what people are paying currently. So you would type in your property value. For this, we're just going to say an assessed value of $300,000, and you hit view your tax receipt. This spits out what I like to call a CVS style receipt of everything your tax bill goes to that the county funds. So we have it broken up by sort of our functions and then the departments that fall under those functions. So for someone that has an assessed value of $300,000 at the 2024 assessment with the 2024 budget, it is going, or the 2024-25 budget, about $51 is going to culture and recreation and how it breaks apart through these departments. About 172 to debt services, economic, 344 goes to education, general government. Our next big two are going to be human services and public safety. Take a majority of the taxes based off of how they're budgeted. And so someone with an assessment of $300,000 in this current year is paying $1,350. And this is how it splits out. I wanted to show you this one first because we have this link down here at the bottom, is if a resident feels that maybe services should be shifted, priorities should be shifted, this is where we've brought in the Balancing Act software. So what this does, I'm going to do the guides that we can walk through how it works, is it tells you you can reshift the priorities of a balanced budget. There are two ways of doing that: changing what we spend the money on and changing what we bring in. And it gives you a little breakdown. This is obviously not ours. This is a sample that the software comes with, but it shows you that there are categories and subcategories, so make sure you click them and check. We are allowed to ask questions. We don't have any questions posed in our simulation right now, but we can pose questions about increasing, maintaining, and decreasing certain services. And there's ways for individuals to leave comments, and we see those in real time. Up at the top, there's the green bar right now. This one on the screen is red because it says you are in a deficit. We do not allow submissions of deficits. You have to get back to balanced or surplus to submit on here. This also just shows that you can have more info. In each individual, we have information about the department, so what the money is going to, and it links to the department website. So if you don't really know what maybe soil and water does, we give you a brief description and then link you to the website so you can go and visit and see all the things that soil and water is doing. And then you submit your budget, and we can see on the back end what you have increased, what you have decreased, any comments you have left, and really take note of what that means for the budget and get the resident voice in as well. So this is what it looks like. It has revenues over to the left, expenditures over to the right. You'll notice some things are locked. Sales tax. We do not allow residents to increase our sales tax because that's not something we can just increase. It is very much based off of the economy, what we think we're going to get in, and very historical, and we're in a time where it's not growing much these days. We enjoyed a couple years where we were in excess of it. These days, we're coming in right at or very close to budget these days. So you'll see something for sales tax. You can absolutely leave a comment and learn about, but it's not something you can increase. Ad valorem, that is our property tax. That is what we have the most control over because we can set the rate. This is again in the 24-25 adopted budget rate, so 1 penny equals 5.2 million. So you can increase the budget and you'll see you now have a surplus of 5.2, or we can say we want to decrease the rate and you would have a deficit of 5.2. With our current upcoming budget that we are building, a penny is now $8.1 million. So every time we want to cut a penny, we have to find $8.1 million. I'll give us a little surplus right here. We do have other taxes, and it breaks out what those other taxes are. This should say charges for services. It took me until about last week to realize I fat-fingered changes for services, but this is our charges for services, so different fees and things like that. We also do have one set up. We have our revenue stabilization fund in here. We currently are not using any principal. That's why it does say 0 right here. But it does allow for you to use the revenue stabilization fund, but we have it set up on an alert that if you want to use this, please note that the revenue stabilization fund takes a supermajority. So we're going to have a full, or at least 4 votes consensus to use this fund. And it does, once you say, yep, I understand, you are allowed to increase it. But we do let people know how certain funds are used and what the consequences or what the different actions have to be. And same for over here on the spending. Since I've put us into a surplus, we can decide we want to spend additional funds on libraries. The rate at which it goes up is set at a 10% interval. So there are some departments where if you really would like to fund them, you're gonna have to get comfortable clicking. And it's gonna take a couple of clicks. But we are able to see the numbers of clicks, the average number of clicks per grouping. And so you can see different things. Again, all tells you what it is and leads you to the website for the county commissioners and the department you have chosen. And we also set up a suggestion area to where if you would like to tell us what you would like to see funded or moved or priority shift, you can do that. And then once you hit submit, we usually get this, it refreshes every day. There's some days where we will see it in real time, but at least every 24 hours, we can see when new comments, submissions, or anything like that comes in. That is pretty much this technology. It will get updated again as we get a proposed budget around late April, early May. We'll update it again so that the proposed is in there and we can collect the comment. We really wanted to launch this first very softly to see if it was something that everyone thought was a great idea, if it had any use. And so far the feedback has been very positive, that it's a great tool. But that is the tool.
Thank you, Amanda. I had fun with it. Of course, I gave all the money to the school district that it would let me. But I did have fun with it. I have a question for the county. Listening to your meeting the other day, I don't understand. You talk about mental health fund, and you used, it's not the normal mental health fund. I can't actually read my writing right now. But is there a different fund for mental health?
Yes, it's $50 million, of which now we have a balance of, Eric, can you help me out, or Amanda?
Probably 42 by the end of this year.
Yeah, we've been using it. That does not take a super majority to tap into, so we have used it.
And then use the word corpus?
Means the principal,
Okay, all right.
if it's $50 million, that's the corpus that we're talking about, not the interest that's derived off it. Yeah. While we're on that, there was one comment, Amanda, I wanted to bring in that anytime we use the Revenue Stabilization Fund or the Mental Health and Behavioral Health Fund, that reduces the amount of interest that is derived from that. It's very important to note that with every budget, we take every penny of that interest and have it already allocated into other programs. So, for instance, the Revenue Stabilization Fund, which is the corpus, was $300 million. The interest coming off that is already dedicated. If we go in with a supermajority and say, take $20 million of that out, it automatically has a ripple effect that will now cause a deficit in those other programs that we've already funded throughout the year. Just every action has a opposite reaction.
So it's a sacred cow.
I know, in my mind, it certainly isn't, but you just have to think long and hard, and it's why it's a supermajority that takes it. If you want to take from it, there should be a really strong priority. You are going to have an impact on other areas of county funding.
Can we recognize the educational science fact that you just made, though? It's a beautiful analogy. It fits in right here. It's beautiful.
It's all because of my public teachers, public education
right.
teachers. Oh, no, I think about that every day, so, and I'm appreciative.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
And the Revenue Stabilization Fund is also, in the event we get a massive hurricane or some natural disaster, we have resources available to deploy, so we don't have to wait for FEMA to come in.
John, you're absolutely right, and I think that all the commissioners are, in lockstep with that. No, I certainly. I know one idea that I've floated out there before is to go the step further and take $100 million of that and put it into a separate lockbox, so that that is always there for emergency. There's, that's one person's opinion on that. But if there was a natural disaster and say we had to dip into it for $100 million or $150 million just to get the debris off the streets, that's what we're talking about, in the hopes we will get money back from FEMA or some other source. But I quickly add that we are still waiting for our final payments from FEMA from Hurricane Florence. But in the event that we do that, it will have an immediate impact on the amount of interest that we can get, and there will be other programs throughout the county that will suffer, whenever we use it.
So the agreement that we have with you for the county, at the MOU, if you had to meet our need for an emergency because our fund balance is so low.
Right.
That would come out of revenue stabilization?
Depends on the amount of the need and the urgency of it. But the short answer is yes, we are there. We have always been and will and continue to be. And again, there is no disagreement among the staff or the commissioners. We are your backstop. We are your fund balance in the case of an emergency.
I just never thought, where would it come from? But that's very helpful to know.
Well, that's why we have smart people sitting over here to my right. Sorry, Eric.
Any other questions for the
I was
county?
counting the number of times you look over here, because it's the same amount of time I look over at Ashley and go, oh, am I on the ballpark? But also with that $500,000 sort of deductible for an emergency, we would be hard pressed to find a single event that wasn't a disaster that would reach that amount of money in the first place.
I agree. And again, I can only say that we stand ready and able, and we do have the funds. We are not going to let our school system down. We simply are not. I know there's been some debate back and forth about it, and especially with the pressure led by myself to spend down your fund balance so that we get the money that has been appropriated to the schools back on the street. That has really been it, knowing full well that if there is an issue, we will be there.
Thank you, Commissioner Zappa. Ms. Barnhart?
I just want to echo some truth to that, and we've seen that, and we appreciate the relationship specifically at New Hanover High School, to be able to be responsive to the needs, and so I think this open line of communication that we're building and we're going to continue to build is able to showcase where the needs are, what we're doing with the money, how quickly we're able to get an RFP out to spend it, so that we are reinvesting in our schools and our staff. So we're seeing that, and we appreciate that, Commissioner.
Thank you, Josie.
Any more questions on this before we move on? All right, take it away, Dr. Barnes.
Right, and I think the message being that it's not the school board against the commissioners, it's the commissioners and the school board against the world, right? Right.
Yes.
Sort of, most of my examples end up somewhere around the lines of something from The Walking Dead, so,
And I will say, this is my ask of him to explain it because it's new, and
Yeah.
I'd rather have Dr. Barnes explain the Family Support Services pilot
And
now
it's actually
than later.
a perfect example of where the county looks for opportunities to lean into the school system. I've said several different times in several different places, and principals, you can nod or shake your head as you, when I say this, I think you're going to know which way to go. Hannah, you as well. Yeah, no, read that into what you will. I've said numerous times that our challenges in this district are not academic. They're behavioral, social, emotional, attendance-based. That we have good teachers doing great work. We have good principals doing good work. And I'm fully confident that if our chronically absent children were at school 20 days more a month, or 20 days more a year, we would see things improve in their academics as well. If we provided more time on task behavior, less disruption in our school system, in the classrooms, you would see things improve academically as well. So that was a comment I had made at one point when I was meeting with Mr. Cradle and Mr. Coudray and a couple of others, and kind of had made that statement. We were talking about pre-K, I think, at the time. And I went on my merry little way to whatever was happening next to me. And a couple of months later, they called back and said, we'd like to bring you back in and talk about a pilot we're thinking about. And so they took just that one statement about what we were talking about to heart, and they're wanting to pilot a cooperative agreement between us and the Department of Social Services where we have DSS workers who are solely intent on helping with chronic absenteeism in our schools. And so what they're proposing is a 3-year pilot with 5 employees that are DSS employees but are built into our school system and designed specifically to support those chronically absent students that we're having trouble turning the corner with. And it's just a great opportunity to do some collaborations. We were talking about how, it's hard because we get to a certain place with folks. We really try to coordinate with social services. They have so many things on their plate. And so the county responded with an opportunity to say, let's see how we can bridge those gaps and make those tighter together. So obviously, that's not going to be district-wide. 5 is a pilot, and we will pilot it. At this point in time, I'm looking at 3 elementary schools, a middle and a high. Different socioeconomic backgrounds, different sort of school criteria, to make sure we've got a good spread of where do we get the biggest bang for our buck, so to speak. But it's an opportunity for us to really target some chronic issues that we have with our school system around attendance. So I'll take any very easy question that has to do with that.
I have one. If it's a 3-year pilot, will it be the same 3 elementaries, the middle and the high? Will it stay there?
That would be my intent, simply because, and I don't think we said that explicitly, but I think it's important to have that sort of longitudinal data as well. So we would look at schools that have a specific pressure point and a need, because honestly, attendance issues are different in elementary school than they are in secondary, okay? At some point in time, it switches over from being maybe a family concern to being a student concern. I know that when I was in high school and both my parents went to work, there was only one thing keeping me from going to school, and that was me. So it tends to be that different things come up in different times and different reasons, and this would help us pinpoint where this gets us the most effect.
Questions?
Just to maybe reemphasize that point, there are differences between secondary and elementary attendance. Students with chronic absenteeism in high school are about a 20% chance less likely to graduate on time as their peers. The number 1 predictor for student success is going to be 3rd grade reading level, but the number 2, maybe number 3, but one of those in elementary school of predicting student success is chronic absenteeism, and that's something that we're seeing across the board. It doesn't matter if you are a student attending Howe Pre-K or you're attending Laney High School. That is maybe one of the largest hurdles we are trying to overcome. And the best way you can do that, I'm going to push to Dr. Hamilton. She's talked a lot about this 2x10, which is the opportunity to speak for 2 minutes to make a great connection with a student 10 consecutive days. And just in that 2x10 model, you can change a student's outlook and outcome. But we need them there for 10 days. And so we have to work very hard to do that. And one of the ways we do it is by having a great volume of staff and a great quality of staff that can support people as we are making sure that they come to school so we can have those great interactions. It's kind of that domino effect that we see that starts out, and it's the reason why Head Start and Pre-K was such a big, important factor for all of Hanover County.
It's also, and not to be colloquial, but it's sort of the canary in the coal mine, right? Because a chronic absenteeism can be a harbinger of deeper issues or concerns or problems that we can lean into and help and fix. So it's sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, our former colleague, Mr. McManus, he's very, very passionate about this as being a former principal. And I know speaking for myself, back in my principal days, I spent way too many hours at the courthouse trying to get a parent, because at the elementary level, trying to get a parent to get the child to school every day. And, instead of doing that, it'd be great if we can, have these folks, in-house that know the children or working with the children. I think it's an exceptional idea.
Also, when we did our budget priority listening sessions, this idea of chronic absenteeism keeps bubbling up to the surface. And what we kind of agreed to is it's not the problem by itself, but it undergirds all of our other challenges that we have. And this opportunity is going to be along with schools looking for ways to reward and recognize good attendance as well. So you don't just want to take out the behavior you don't want, you want to replace it with the behavior that you do want. So helping kids realize the benefit of attendance and also recognizing that good attendance for kids as well. It's also the main focus for communities and schools next year. They're talking about being present. Why being present matters.
They had a good quiz like this, see some of our schools highlighting and how they highlight it, and we're already actively doing that, so it's wonderful.
But not to use Mr. Zappel, there's another of Newton's laws of motion that say when you have all forces working together on an object, you accelerate its movement, right? So this is a good example of CIS and the county and the school pointing in the same direction. It's the second law.
Superintendent Barnes.
That's me.
Chris.
Yeah. Some of the things I've been called today, either one, it works.
Just make sure I got it straight in my head. The pilot calls for one elementary, one middle, and one high school, or is it 3 elementaries?
There's 5 together, so I think I would pilot 3 elementary, a middle, and a high.
I see. And the funding for this comes from where?
Through Department of Social Services.
Okay, and.
I'm sure it comes from
Ashley,
you at some
quick
point.
Jump in, yeah.
So this was part of the county staff recommended this at the last work session.
Yes.
And we just really want to show our support for the staff's recommendation. So that was, so I'm not sure the money side over there, I'll have to defer to them to answer that, but we definitely support the direction and the recommendation by the staff.
This is the endowment piece, is that right?
No, this is different from the endowment piece. So some funding will come from revenues from the state DSS, and the rest will be from mental health funds.
Ah, good, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on this? I just think it's really exciting. And thank you guys for dreaming it up and bringing it to us.
Could I also ask for a little bit fleshing out of the 2x10 plan I wrote down in my notes? What does that mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the 2x10 plan is this, it's a research-based concept for positive interactions. So one of the things we're doing in New Hanover County is we're looking at safe and civil schools and STOIC as a model. One of the tenets of STOIC is the I is interacting positively and interacting consistently. So when you think about interacting consistently, we ask the question, what does it look like to have, we use this phrase, ongoing regard, but what that means is a deep respect for someone. What does it look like to build change in that person? And the idea is that you can build change in a person that you want by speaking to them positively for 2 minutes a day for 10 consecutive days. So if I really wanted if my wife really wanted me to do great at laundry, if she talked to me for 10 consecutive days, 2 positive minutes about how great I am at laundry, I'm going to be one of the best folders of fitted sheets you've ever seen in your life. The idea is that in order to build a really good quality relationship with someone, you want to spend at least 2 minutes a day having great positive interaction with them for 10 consecutive days. After that, you've built a bond with that person, so you can be personal, you can ask deep questions, you can have a connection with them that they're going to want to, in return, be successful so that you can continue those positive interactions. If we do that with our students, we're just connecting kids to great adults, and it's going to lead them to great success.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I wondered myself. That's awesome.
So if you have somebody in your world, in your circle, that you really want to change your relationship with, you have to be the person that has the awkward conversation of positivity, 2 minutes a day for 10 consecutive days. And if you think about somebody and say, man, they need to do that, you should be doing it to that person.
Does it work?
Ms. Clark? And how do you know that it works?
Because there are students who still come back after you've established that relationship and will tell you things that they would not have told you otherwise. It builds a form of trust.
Yeah.
And I want to zero in on that for a second, Kim, because that's why our schools are safe.
That's it.
It's not because of one initiative or another. It's because kids trust the adults in their building. And learning does not occur without a formal, effective, and appropriate relationship between adults and students in the building. Now, Jared, Katie did text and said this probably isn't the example you want to use.
Yeah, I know. I'm regretting everything I said about laundry.
But you're so good at it.
Sure.
I need a lesson on the fitted sheets, if you
Right.
can help me with that.
Well, speaking of someone who's found their wife unfolding and refolding her T-shirts. Yeah. I finally just stopped. I think, Jared, you brought up a little bit about STOIC and about safe and civil schools. That is one of the main budget priorities that is going to the county, is this idea that safety is a multi-pronged approach. Safety is not just metal detectors. It's not just security officers. It's also helping students learn new behaviors that will serve them as they mature and grow up. If you go all the way back to when I was in the wilderness program 30 years ago, they used to say that kids act out when they either run out of or have never learned effective coping mechanisms for what they are experiencing. If we can get ahead of that ball, that's going to fix the problem permanently. And so that Safe and Civil Schools money that we are requesting is to go ahead and embed that in every school rather than just the ones that we have done it with so far. We have it in about 11, Jared, 10, 11, is that pretty close?
Yes, 11.
And this will get it district-wide and be the main focus for our teachers for professional development next year.
So they act out when they have run out of
Or never learned
or never learned.
effective coping mechanisms for their behavior. And let's be fair, it's different being a kid than it was when we were kids. It is different. The pressures are different. The anxiety is different. And if we can help our students learn how to regulate themselves without adult interaction and intervention, isn't that what we want for adults to do? I think we all know some adults who struggle with it already, who didn't learn it back when they were students. But I think part of it is also that, but part of it is about helping adults learn how to process things with kids without inadvertently increasing their stress level. Okay? And the best example I can think of is going back, everybody in here has seen The Breakfast Club. Okay? And going back to when Bender and the AP are having that argument in the library about when he gets racking up the detentions. You guys know what I'm talking about? Yeah. You probably lived that movie, didn't you? In that movie, what happens is the adult in the situation continues to re-stress the kid. The kid's behavior continues to decline. The adult continues to reinforce that. If we can help as adults learn how's the best way to react to things, it lowers the thermostat. So it's sort of a multi-pronged approach, and it's also a school-wide effort to talk about what does this school want to be about? What's our identity going to be? What's how we treat people going to be about? And so it's a widespread area that's going to hopefully change. The plan is it's going to change the whole thing.
Chris, how do you incorporate the parents? Is there a main part of this equation?
Of course that they are. We're hoping that we're going to be able to showcase some of these things for everybody as well. For families, for parents, for the whole nine. Now, what I've started to do is talk a lot, and it started with parents whose kids go to a school where we have Leader in Me. And we have a couple of different schools, and I saw you out at Porter's Neck last week. I was talking to a parent today whose kids go to Holly Tree. And I said, do they really talk about Leader in Me at home? Is that like a thing? And yeah, how much what we teach them at school bleeds over into other places. You know, but honestly, we need to support our parents with everything that we can find that's going to help them. And if our students learn how to regulate better, that's going to change things in every place where they are.
Okay. Spring break. We are over here discussing the next meeting, so we're looking at calendars. School spring break comes soon. In the
2 weeks and 2 days.
And we are bringing you a spring surprise gift early.
We are?
Budget.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that. So how
I thought it was food. I was so excited.
No, almost. So skipping over the month of April, could we look at May 8th, which is a Thursday? And we haven't talked lately about the time, because I tend to eat lunch after a meeting like this rather than before. I'm a late eater. I don't know how we got to 12:30 when we did, but it just popped up and we seemed to make it work. So now's a good time between now and then to talk about our Thursdays good days. Is the time a good time? And I know everybody appreciate a month without a meeting. So if we have spring break for the month of April, May 8th. Okay. Is that at 10 or 11?
This time would work, this time would sandwich in between those two.
Y'all look at it, and Judy will send out the invitation.
I'll be out of the country.
Okay.
Are you going somewhere cool?
It's my anniversary, we're going to country.
That qualifies.
Yeah, it does.
And I won't be thinking about you. No offense.
Looks like we're gonna have a 2-minute conversation for the next 10 minutes.
Oh, my. So, yeah, just, we'll send that, and then if you could look at it earlier than later if we need to tweak it. But right now, I've got confirmation that Natalie can make that meeting, and that's good since we're skipping. But Natalie is on the April 8th junket. She's part of the planning for it. They're planning it, I'm not. We're not, except for Dr. Barnes doing the school part. You're driving a school bus, is that right?
I'm driving a van. You don't want me to drive a school bus.
So, and does anybody have any other questions on any of this before we adjourn for 6 weeks?
I just want to double check you're saying on May the 8th at 12:30, same time.
Yes, ma'am.
And we can coordinate our stuff, okay.
I think we'll probably be done by 10. I think usually the May meeting is nuts and bolts, getting ready for end of year, and getting ready for graduation and testing, so.
I would ask that we don't go past the beginning of May, the end of May. Is extremely busy.
Yeah, no, we know that we need to
Extremely
deal
busy.
with end of school, and we're aware of that.
Anything past spring break, you have an automatic pass on. The kids are the primary goal. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't exactly know what we're going to do with that meeting, but we have to get past the budget and then group on next steps and how we go forward. So, if there's no other business, all in favor say aye. Aye. Meeting adjourned. Yeah? Yes, that is what we're going to talk about.